Welcome to the Adoptive Dad Playbook. Sit back, relax, and grab a beverage with your host, David Bischlein.
Welcome back to another episode of the Adoptive Dad Playbook podcast. Man, this has been a ton of fun. I'm really enjoying making these episodes, getting to talk to people. I hope you guys are getting something out of them. I know that I'm learning from adoptive and foster dads, and I hope that you are as well. They're a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. Today's guest is no different. He brings a wealth of knowledge. He is a adoptive dad, a foster dad, and he also is part of a multiracial family. Today's episode is called Multi-Family because he has a Chinese son and an African-American foster daughter. Just a guy that brings a lot of good experience, life experience, and I hope you guys enjoy today's episode. Our guest today is a 15-year veteran of the ministry. He has spent the last 9 years at Northside Christian Church, which my wife and I used to attend in Springfield, Missouri. He is a foster and adoptive dad and a husband, a musical master. He is also, most importantly, a Denver Broncos fan from Houston, Missouri. I'd like to welcome Allen Tyger. Hello, Allen. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today on the podcast.
What's up, man? Good to be here. Good to celebrate a Broncos win as well. So not many of them, so we got to go hard, right?
Drew Lock, riding Drew Lock. All right, Lock or die. Is that my son? Now, before we get started, I just want to tell our listener, well, all one of them, probably my parents, that Alan and I have known each other for quite a while. He was a music minister at Christian Campus House in Springfield, Missouri. How long did you do that, Alan?
I was there for 5 years, four and a half, 5 years. Yeah.
I know I was on the board, I think, for some of that time, I'm pretty sure, or at least part of it.
You let me stay. Yes.
I did. I was kind of like the black sheep of the board. I kind of came up with crazy new ideas that all the old timers were like, oh, we can't do that. But it was good. It was an interesting thing. So I've known Alan for a long time. I've known his wife for quite a while. Lovely, awesome people. And he is a great journey to tell. Alan, I know during this time of COVID, how has your family been during all this?
Well, it's been really interesting. I mean, I got a lot of health stuff back in the history. So a lot of chemo in the past, all that sort of stuff. So I guess you would put me in that immunocompromised category. So I've been staying pretty distant, which is kind of hard when you work with college students because they are not distant. But yeah, that's kind of been the dance I've been playing really the last few months is trying to figure out when, how can you meet and how can you do it safely? Also keeping the kids safe at home. Both kids are either in daycare or at school now. So there's a little bit of risk there. But other than that, we're just kind of being safe, masking up, doing those, doing all the stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where we are.
I know for the listener, my mom and dad, that's what I said before. You are a 2-time cancer survivor. I'm going to say you kicked cancer's butt twice. And that's what's an incredible part of your story. I know one time I'm undefeated. I know I got to bring you Kentucky Fried Chicken one time in the hospital. I almost ate it on the way in. And my wife goes, don't you dare get any for yourself. But I know that you've kicked cancer's butt twice. And that's an incredible part of your story is that you are a 2-time cancer survivor. Not one, but twice. And you are from Houston, Missouri, which doesn't live in Houston. He's from Houston, though. Tiny, tiny town.
Right.
Where would you call it?
North Missouri.
Yes. It's South Central. Central Missouri.
It's South Central, but yeah, it's small. Definitely small town vibe. So,
when I was coaching down there, we used to drive through Houston a lot to get to the Salems and by the West Plainses and the Mountain Groveses and all that.
Yeah, so. All of those teams just whooped us every single Friday night. So yeah. Speaking football, I can't stand any of those towns, but just because of those nights. So,
well, I mean, someone's got to lose, and so I mean,
it was us all the time. Yeah,
I've taken my fair share of lumps as well. All right, we're going to get into it here. We're going to give Alan his warm-up questions. Number one, what is your drink of choice currently? What are you drinking right now?
Right now, I've got on one side, I've got a Coke because that's what's free out of our machine. On the other side is some coffee. which when you knew me, like when we used to hang out, it was Mountain Dew all the time.
Yes.
But, I'm a coffee junkie now. So pour over, espresso, all the stuff, man. I'm that nerd now. So coffee.
Well, good. All right. Let me ask you this. What's one thing that annoys your wife and kids the most? There's got to be one thing that that really just drives your wife and or your kids crazy.
I'd say I'm a professional pile maker. So like our house has all of these little piles of things that I've started and not completed. I don't know if that bothers the kids. I mean, one of them can't even crawl yet, so she doesn't care. But I guess between me and the son, we all make piles, just piles everywhere. My wife is very, very neat, very, very organized most of the time. And so I am, I'll start things and just kind of leave them right where they are. So there's a pile of tools somewhere, or a pile of clothes somewhere, or, pile of food somewhere, just whatever. I decided to do something else. The pile
That sounds like you're the Bishline house. Instead of their piles at my house, it's just random stuff strewn about. All right, next question. What TV show, podcast, or movie or book have you gotten into recently? What's something you've kind of really dug?
And we've been keeping up with This Is Us. That's kind of our emotional letdown of the evening. We do. So yeah, that's we've been doing that. So kind of keeping up. We're a little behind right now, so I think I'm missing some stuff. But.
You mean the show Drama? For the Sake of Drama is what I like to call it. My wife digs that show. I've tried to watch it. I'm like, okay, what? Why did that? What? Is that drama for the sake of drama? I get it. I can see the appeal, but
it's a lot. It's like, nothing happened in my life today, so let's go see what happened to Kevin. So
I have my own problems I have to take care of. All right, last question, or the warm-up questions at least. You have one afternoon, no kids and no wife. What are you going to do?
Oh, well, this actually happened last week for us on our anniversary, 11 years. We had my wife's sister took the kiddos, and so we had an afternoon and an evening. So we got, you'll appreciate this, Emo's Pizza. We got Emo's, and we grabbed some snacks on the way home. We watched a movie or some shows or something. I don't know. We stayed up way too late, ate a bunch of junk food, including Emo's.
I mean, knowing your wife, she probably had like 2 squares and she's done, because she's about as big as a twig.
She did well. I mean, she doesn't eat the Emo's often, but yeah, we had somebody giving us a gift card, so we maxed it out. Just had the best part about that whole thing was the morning, where we just did not have to set an alarm. We woke up at you still wake up at the same time, but you don't have to rush out of bed before the kids come running in.
I get you there. Our kids are old enough now. We don't have to get up, but we still do, because they'll get up like at 5:30 and want to play video games or watch YouTube or something like that. So that is an issue that we do.
Yeah.
So let's kind of get in the meat and potatoes, quote unquote. If you're vegetarian, the meat and tofu. So kind of just walk us through your adoption journey, because it's awesome. So for the listener, Allen he's adopted once, and he's fostering currently. He adopted from China, a little boy from China, and he is currently fostering a little. How old's your foster daughter?
She's 9 months old. Yeah.
And how old's your son?
He turned 6 on Saturday.
Yeah, he's pretty close to Tim's age, my youngest. I know, Hudson. And so your journey is really incredible to guide. Why don't you just kind of go through, first off, just in general to our listener, what's your, kind of go through that for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess you go way back, and we've mentioned kind of the health stuff in the past. A couple cancer diagnoses, one when I was 16, one when I was 24. And that really kind of did a number on a lot of my body. Again, my kidneys aren't loving me right now, so trying to avoid the COVID. But just also that was, that kind of put an end to the possibility of biological children. That was pretty early on. Radiation and chemo just don't really bode well for that. So we, getting married, we kind of knew there really wasn't much of a possibility for bio children, but my wife and I both, through international mission trips and just doing some, just kind of having a love for the world in general, was just, both of us loving kids as well, knew that we wanted kids. So adoption was kind of on the table from the start. So we waited about 5 years before we started the process with the international adoption in China, which took us about 2 years overall. Our story with Hudson is kind of crazy. I know a lot of people have kind of the backs and forths and the ups and downs, and ours was just a really long wait. There's a lot of that, but we didn't ever really ever have like the rug pulled out from under us, that sort of stuff. Some of the heartbreak that we've heard a lot of, but we finally got all of our home study and stuff done, but it was like right at the start of the Chinese New Year. This is like 2017, I believe. 2017 into 2018. And so the whole country just shuts down, for celebration. And so we just waited and waited and waited. And it was like, it was February, mid-February, pretty close to my Valentine's Day. My birthday's about a week after that too, right around in there when we got the call. And they had said, we've got a match and we're, why don't you take a look at these pictures and the medical history, all that. And so that was Hudson. We traveled to get him. He was 2.5 years old when we brought him home. Like I said, he'll be 6 this coming Saturday. He's thriving. He's had a lot of cleft lip and palate surgeries and that sort of stuff. So that was his special need. All adoptions through China are special needs.
I think unless you're adopting from internationally from or siblings and or older children, they're all can be considered special needs from what Brett and I, from our experience of walking through international adoption. It's really rare. And I guess some countries are willing, but you have to go there for like 6 months or 4 months and kind of live there for that. So when you adopted from China, like, did you guys fundraise? Did you kind of save? How did you fund that?
Yeah, we did a little bit of both. All in all, I think the adoption overall, just being kind of just lay it out there, I think it ended up costing us about $30,000.
That's it
total. Yeah.
Wow.
Which it may have gone a little higher than that. I don't know. I'm not really the budget one, but that's the number I remember. We kind of committed before we would start the process to save 10,000 of our own. And that was kind of our like measure of like, once we get to this point, we'll be ready. And then we sent out prayer cards where it was just, a picture of our family and saying, hey, we're doing this. If you'd like to follow our journey, here's our blog. We were selling t-shirts through a company here in Springfield. It was a $20 t-shirt and we got 10 of it, which was really one of the better deals with that type of a fundraiser that we had found. That made us a couple $1,000s. And then we used an online platform that was Adopt Together. I think it's .org. I know they've kind of merged with charity.org or something like that as well. But
I think is that similar to the Life Song? Is that similar?
Yeah. It's close. Adopt Together is really just, it kind of feels like a GoFundMe or that sort of a thing where you make a profile. And then the amazing thing with that is there were just companies that would like search profiles on that website and just randomly give money. I remember one specifically, we got this random $500 grant and we're like, who did this come from? And we went and looked through everything and it said PepsiCo, like the company Pepsi.
Wow.
And so you get towards the end of a year and companies are looking to, donate and that sort of stuff. And they find sites like this. So we did all of the donations. We told people they could send us checks and that sort of stuff, but we just wanted to keep it. We kind of got to fall under their tax exempt umbrella, that sort of stuff. So we didn't have to mix things up with the church. The church was willing to do it. They were actually also doing it for another couple in the church, giving them the tax exempt status to take the donations. We just didn't want to mix with being staff on the church and getting that weird. So we went with an outside organization.
And you're drinking Coke and Pepsi donate.
I know. And Pepsi funded
your adoption and you're drinking Coke, man.
They're going to take it back.
So when you traveled to China, was that a 2 week roughly? How long were you in China? Yeah. Where did you go in China? Kind of.
I think we were there for 2.5 weeks. It was kind of an all over sort of a thing. The first half of the trip was all planned before we even met Hudson. So we actually did a lot of touristy stuff, which is a weird thing because you're like there, you want to meet your son, all this sort of stuff. But they also know that you're not going to want to sit through the Chinese circus, with a kid that doesn't know you and it's just screaming his head off, that sort of stuff. So we got to do a lot of the cultural things ahead of time. So we flew into Beijing, got to do a lot of the capital city stuff and the Emperor's Palace and Tiananmen Square, all of that stuff. And got, actually had some friends who we knew that were over there, and they met us in Beijing. It was an international student that we knew. And so that was really, really cool. So he kind of took us around to the places. He's like, no, you don't want to go to the McDonald's. You want to go to this, which I don't entirely recommend. Now, by the end of the trip, McDonald's was like my go-to because the cheeseburgers taste the same. So,
and they have Coke there instead of Pepsi. They have
a lot of Coke. There was a lot of that. So
let me guide you here. I'm curious because I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube, and I think a lot of adoptive parents look into like the gotcha day. What was your gotcha day, or whatever you guys want to call it? I know some people don't like that term. So
yeah,
you showed up. What city did you pick Hudson up, and kind of share with us what that day and that moment was like? Because as we prepare, or hopefully get to prepare for that at some point, that to me is like, it's exciting, but it's also kind of extremely nerve-wracking, because I think in China you see your child and then you take them with you. Correct? Am I right in that?
Yeah.
Because I know in the Korea program you get to meet your child.
Yeah.
Twice, maybe once. You leave, if as long as there's no quarantine, and then you come back and get them. But for you, kind of explain what it was like to meet your son, a child that you love, that you've never met before. You love this kid, never met him, and he's like, look at these white dudes. What is this white guy doing there? And kind of go through that, because I think that to me is one of the awesomest parts of love.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the night before in the hotel, we'd done all of this, traditional Chinese stuff, and we're getting ready to go to bed. And the next day we're meeting our son, and we're calling him Hudson. He doesn't know that yet. Like, it's just this whole, like, everything is about to change. And I just remember us both. We were both like crying. It's like, what if this kid hates us? Like, what if we made the wrong choice? What if it's completely, what if he's just, he's 2.5. He has no idea what's about to happen.
Let me ask you this. I know that I didn't want to interrupt you, but I have heard a lot of stories about Chinese adoptions where you go to get your child and not all of their diagnoses have been disclosed. Yeah. Were you nervous about that? Was that something that you were like in the back of your mind as you met them? Because I've heard a story, and I'm sure this is rare. They picked their child up and the child was partially deaf and they didn't even know that. Like, did that cross your mind at all? Well,
there was a few inconsistencies, when they're translating medical documents from Chinese to English. Some things get a little weird there, and there were some inconsistencies with Hudson. We were a little bit worried about some things, and then some of his behavioral reports that we'd gotten from the orphanage that he was at. We were just like, this kid, like it was, that he's really angry, that he screams when he doesn't get what he wants and all this. And we're like, okay, so that sounds like every other 2-year-old in the world, but like, what if there's something neurological, that sort of thing going on there? So it was really terrifying. That was most of the emotion of that night, is like, we have no idea what we're walking into. That day, we get up. We get on a bus. They take us to, I guess in America, you could kind of equate it to like the county seat. Like it's like the place where all the government stuff happens. And by that time we had left Beijing and we kind of went to like central China, to this city called Zhangzhou, which is where the county seat of this, which for them it's a huge province. So all the government stuff happens there. The interesting thing with Hudson, he actually was not coming from the orphanage that the other kids were coming from. We traveled with about 6 other families. And so we got to know them as well. And so we're all meeting our child that day. Well, Hudson had come from farther away. He came from Shanghai, which is way over on the east coast of China, right there, big city. He was living in a healing home, which is where they'll send kids from like an orphanage. They'll go to a healing home to get ready for a surgery. So like a cleft lip or palate surgery. And then after the surgery, they go there to heal afterwards. The great thing about Hudson is he never left the healing home. So we're talking about like going, instead of him being in an orphanage of like 80 to 100 plus kids, there were like 40 in the healing home. And so it was really more of a one-on-one situation. So we started getting way better reports towards the end of our time. So he had actually come from Shanghai the night before and had stayed in an orphanage that he'd never been in. And so this is freaking us out as well. Like, he doesn't know these nannies. He doesn't know, everything is just weird. So when we got there, he was there. So they were kind of like getting us all ready, because they were like, okay, you could wait up to an hour, 2 hours, because they're bringing these kids from all over China and, with trains and all that sort of stuff. When we got there, out of all of these families, he was there. It was just Hudson. He's in the middle of the room on a rocking horse. And we're just like, is that him? Because we've seen pictures with him. We're like, is that whatever? And then they're like, yeah. So we hand off our cameras and we hand off our phones and all that sort of stuff to these friends that we've made, and they start filming. And we've got like a 20-minute video of which is just an amazing piece of history for us and our family, of him, not really being interested in us, not being interested in whatever, until I peeled.
That was my next question.
He was not having it. Yeah, he wasn't getting off of that rocking horse until I pulled out the Curious George doll. And then he took the doll that he had and threw it away and grabbed George, and I was able to pick him up.
He was curious,
Yeah, he was very curious. Yeah. So we played little tickle games there for a while, and then he started to grow. By the time the other families started showing up, him and Bree were laying on the floor playing. It was just like this. It was one of those kind of surreal instant bond connections. And by the time we left, he was dead asleep in her arms. He was just like worn out, which we know now the kid hates to sleep. So it was, we were sure that he didn't sleep the night before because of new place and all that sort of stuff. So, but like just from that, I remember we took him back to the hotel. He took like a 4-hour nap, and then he ate like I've never seen a kid eat before. And then it was, then we went for it. So there was a lot more to the trip, because then the rest of the trip is just paperwork, and each city you stop at, you get a passport, you get a whatever. Interesting side note, he needed a passport to go from China to Hong Kong, but he didn't need a passport to go from China or Hong Kong to the States.
Interesting.
So when he landed in the States, he was an American citizen because we had all that paperwork and whatever, but he still had to get a passport while we were there because we were flying out of Hong Kong. So to pass from China to Hong Kong, we had to get him a passport. So he has a Chinese passport, a U.S. citizenship. He's like an international spy. So he's all set, ready to go. But yeah, that was the day. And then once we got all the paperwork, we got to spend one night in Hong Kong, which if we go back, I want to go to Shanghai and I want to go to Hong Kong. Those are the two places that I want to actually spend some time in, because it's just amazing. But we just drove in, stayed the night at a hotel, and flew out the next morning. So.
Who did he bond with faster? Like, was there anybody, was it you or your wife? Who did he kind of come to first?
I think he's the playful stuff was definitely me, because we've always done that, and even the wrestling and all that sort of, like, just it's always just been the case. But originally, like, just getting him kind of to loosen up with tickling and that sort of stuff. But with when it comes to almost like the strong bond that's like like butting heads, but it's all in love. Like him and his mom, definitely have had that. So I guess it's a little bit of both. But then over the year, after that, Bree had quite a bit of time off, and then I came back to work, and she was staying home with him, and that's what really kind of solidified the bond there. So there was a lot of the couples who were with us that were really concerned because their kids were just blank stares and they didn't interact with them and that sort of stuff. And we didn't really know how to deal with that, because Hudson was very interactive with us. He was very, funny and very laughing, and, we would chase him and all this. And I just, that was kind of hard for us to come up with a response to it, that your case is actually more normal of what we expected. We're not really sure what's going on with this kid, because he's just like boom immediately. And so we took it as, a confirmation that he was just supposed to be there. So when the transition came, whoa. I know, transaction time. When the transition came to moving from China to Springfield, Missouri, what was a big struggle, or what was some things that really kind of surprised you? Kind of go over just a couple things maybe
if you adopt internationally, that a child from the United States probably wouldn't deal with, or something like that sort of situation.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that we kind of knew going in. We did a lot of like training. I mean, with China, you've got to do the Hague training, which is we did, I think it was 12 hours of that. We had also done, which this is a plug for anybody listening that wants some more, adoption information, foster information, really just behavioral child information. But the Empower to Connect, which is they did a conference. I know they didn't do the conference this last year because of COVID, but they still have tons and tons of, if you just Google Empower to Connect, you'll see it's just amazing child psychology stuff. So we were ready for some of that stuff. I'd say the one that was probably the most like just real, like we realize it, is that, him going from living with other kids and maybe even having to, fight for time, with a nanny, or fight for, food. Every picture we saw, he was in the front of the line, trying, like that sort of thing, to where he's coming home and he's an only child, and there is no lack of food, and there is no lack of, we didn't really deal with, I've heard stories of kids like hoarding food because they don't know if they're going to get more, or kids like, throwing fits when you take food away from them. But we didn't really deal with that, but you could kind of see that shift in him, like wanting to fight everything, or wanting to fight, be possessive with toys and that sort of stuff when he was around other kids. And we were just like, I mean, he's got a cousin who's about, I think she's 2 or 3 months older than him. And so, them getting together, the first couple years was really rough because it was like this toy, whatever. And he just has, there's fight, flight, or freeze mentalities, and he's a fighter. As a matter of fact, he's a biter. Like, he would just latch on, and I don't know how many times his cousin got bit, and it was just like, oh my goodness, in daycare. But that was his mechanism, and we just had to continue to remind ourselves, like, this kid's fought every minute of his life for everything that he has, and he's just gonna have to be reassured that there's no lack, that there's like, we're here for him, and that sort of stuff. And that's what Empower to Connect has really taught us, a whole lot of that kind of connect before correct stuff, where it's like, if he doesn't know that he's safe, it's not going to matter what you're saying to him. You say yes or no, it's not going to matter if he doesn't trust you. And so building that trust was really the first 2-3 years of where we've been. So yeah. Did you
take some time off to try to cocoon? I know that's the thing, that building that attachment, was that tough? Because I know for my wife and I, that's something we kind of worry about, like building that attachment with our daughter at some point.
We had it was really great. The church was super gracious with us. Bree was working at the hospital at the time, so she got her normal maternity leave, and then she had also saved up quite a bit of vacation. So I think she ended up getting close to six plus weeks off, and then ended up only going back part-time anyway. The church, I just kind of petitioned and just asked, like, what is the thing? We've had some people take some paternity leave before, a couple weeks. But with the adoptive situation, I mean, that was a couple weeks out of the country, which I was going to have to take. And then I was like, so is there paternity leave on top of that? And so I actually, in our employee handbook, got to write the adoptive, the adoptive paternal leave or maternity leave policy, which was really, really great. I mean, they gave me plenty of leeway and plenty of space. I think I ended up taking 2 full weeks off when I got back. So that's 5 weeks total of just being completely gone. And then I worked, probably 3 days a week for another week or so. And then kind of came back into full-time sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, we've been looking into kind of the state of Missouri's policy and just kind of our school districts, and that's interesting to hear. So let's switch gears here. Tell us, so we've looked at international, awesome. Tell us how you got into foster care. Kind of give us, why did you decide to go into that? What kind of led you guys to that?
Well, that's a great question, because I'm not 100% sure why. Well, it was early, I guess it'd be early 2019 when we decided that it was time. Hudson was in a pretty good place, and we were thinking, let's, what if we were to adopt again? We started looking at finances. We started looking at pace of life. We just started looking at everything with Hudson, all that sort of stuff, just deciding what we want to do. And kind of where we landed was, well, while we're figuring out what we're doing, or while we're saving money or whatever, what if we fostered and we opened our home up to foster kids? And one of the main things with us was we didn't want to foster older than Hudson, because at that point our priority is Hudson. He's the getting him in a safe and stable,
as it should be.
Yeah, he's just getting ready to start kindergarten, all of that. And so we really didn't want to mess with birth order, if this were to move towards adoption, that sort of stuff. So we were interested in adoption from the start of foster care, but we were also just going in saying emergency placements, weekend placements, respite care, all of that sort of stuff. So we started doing the classes. We just got the classes in. I think it was December when we finished our foster classes. So kind of before stuff started going crazy.
TC, pre-COVID.
PC, yeah, absolutely. And it was, and so we got those done. We got certified, went through a whole nother, it had been long enough that we actually had to do another home study, which was
lucky you,
really frustrating, so, but yeah, that all, we got our certification. And then we had one other placement, which was just an emergency. Mom had, sent the cops on a chase down through Missouri and ended up in Springfield in a ditch with a baby in the back seat. And so the baby came to us for just 3 days until they transferred her back up to where Mom would be in jail and go through that process up there. So she went to another county. So that was an 8-month-old little girl, and she was just there for 3 days, and we were like, okay, well, what are we going to do? They told us, going through all the things, you're never going to get babies. And within, I'm not saying this is going to be everybody's experience. I know.
Oh, trust me, I know. We were told the same thing. So you're not going to get any kids.
You're going to need babies. And I would tell people that too. Like, if you're going in there just to get a baby, like, it's the wrong way, which we were just like, we set our age at 3, I think maybe even 4 and under. And we got calls for way more than that. We got calls for sibling groups and all that. We just got tons of calls. But for us, it was just, it was just a matter of, let's make sure this is the right fit for our family, for Hudson. And then right before Springfield shut down, which would be like mid-March, right around spring break time, we got a call from a little baby who'd been in the NICU, which my wife was working there for a month. And so she'd been there a month, and she was born 3 months early, actually. And so we were asked if we would take placement until they figured out. So mom had abandoned the baby. Dad was still interested, but he had found himself in some legal trouble and was going to end up being in the jail. So we took her, and she's still there. So she's still at our house. So little baby E, she is there, and she's 9 months old last Sunday, and we are just in for whatever. I mean, she's a precious little African-American baby, and she's just smiling all the time. It's just amazing to see her grow, and she's already catching up with milestones. I mean, being that many months behind premature, she's catching up to the scales and that sort of stuff now. She's eating well, all of this stuff. So our journey for that was like, now what are we still fostering, or are we just gonna ride it out with this girl and see what happens, which is where we are now. I mean, we might be one and done when it comes to, a placement and actually in the home for long-term, but we're letting the legal stuff kind of shake out with that. And that's been the hardest part, honestly, with foster, because they'll tell you right when you start fostering that reunification is the number one goal with the family. Number one goal.
And that's the toughest part. I mean, it's awesome, but it's tough because especially, now that you have your son and, having children come in and out, possibly that's gotta be tough. That's something that Greta and I looked at heavily was, could we have a child come in for 6 months and then, our sons get attached and then go, which is awesome because you want that reunification, but that's tough.
Yeah. And I won't lie. I mean, she's been with us 7 7 months. And if things shape up, like, I mean, we pray for her dad and that he can get stuff straightened out and that sort of stuff. But man, it would be a devastating blow. And that's a relationship that just, like, cause she's obviously bonded with us and that sort of stuff. And so that would be heartbreaking on one end, but also really redemptive on another, to just see him going from a place where it doesn't look like he has a shot to actually getting his life put back together. You got to see the story as a whole family, which we know her. And, obviously that's our job as foster parents to look out for her and to give her everything we got until we don't. But yeah, so we're just in for whatever she needs. And that's kind of our position now. So,
all right. So the title of the episode is multi family. And that kind of brings us to the core here. Being a multiracial family, and something that my wife and I are trying to prepare for, what has it been like? What has been a big change? Are you noticing things more now that you have a Chinese son and you have an African-American foster daughter right now? I'm sure, like, as in our training, we did a lot of like microaggressions. And have you noticed that? I know they're younger, and so maybe you don't get as much. Do you get nurses when you bring your son in, like, oh, are you the nanny, or is this your foster child? I mean, I guess in your situation it'll be your foster daughter, but like, kind of explain, like, how has that process been? And real quick, when you were in China, did the Chinese, when you had your son, did they look at you kind of funny?
Yeah, that was really interesting, because he threw quite a few like epic fits, like when we were in China.
Shocking. Kids do that, right?
Yeah, right. And so one I can remember particularly, we were at this game park. It's like this huge zoo, like the biggest zoo I've ever been to, in the middle of China. And we're just this safari park, just walking around. And I mean, he is losing his mind. And we're just standing in line for the train. And I mean, he's just going crazy. We're just trying to control him, trying to get him to not hurt himself or whatever. And it's really interesting. The Chinese culture is very interesting with that. Like, nobody tried to stop anything. No one was like, but I mean, everybody just stared at us. Like, we're just getting like these blank stares of like, you couldn't really tell what they were thinking. Like, it wasn't like, did you steal that child or whatever, but they're just like, are you going to take care of that? Like my child would never, like that sort of a thing. And all these other children are like perfectly standing in line.
I understand it. We went to Disney World. One of my sons pushed the other one down off of a ride. Like, we were getting off of, I think, the mine train or whatever. And my middle, but I don't remember who it was. They're fighting on the middle of getting off this ride. And so I get that. So
we definitely saw it on the Chinese side a little bit. Like, when we were walking, we'd walk from our hotel to Starbucks and we'd carry him, and some, they just stare a little longer. Like, why do you have that child? That sort of stuff. And then coming back, a lot of the work that we had done had been done ahead of time when it came to family and extended family. They kind of knew what was coming. There were some things that were just like, just having hard conversations of, we've got grandparents that, grandparents that were alive in the World War II era when, Asian Americans were not, seen as, whether, that's obviously a Japanese, thing, but to them, it was just obviously this kid is Asian and that sort of, so there's still some just deep stuff there. Both grandmas that were alive when Hudson came home, I mean, it was just like an instant, melting the heart sort of a thing. And I feel like that's it with a lot of racism.
Oh, yeah.
Is once you put an actual person to it, once you have an actual conversation, once you get a hug or you touch that person, I think that's a lot of it. So we haven't really seen a lot. We did, we have really tried, even though Springfield is not super diverse. Springfield is probably about 2 to 5% non-white.
Yes, it's very white.
The majority of that 2 to 5% is Hispanic, and so there's just a very it's very white. So for us, we've really tried. The great thing about Springfield is we have a big university here, a lot of international students. They have a sister campus in China. So they have a huge Chinese celebration every year. So that's something we try to get to. Obviously didn't happen this year, but we try to get to every year so that he can see adults, Chinese adults. Our church, we usually have Chinese students that are, we have Chinese student class, all that sort of stuff. So he's getting to see, we just do our best to try to get him to see diversity outside of just our white neighborhood. The other thing that we've really tried to do is just be really careful with where we have him when it comes to like daycare. School system was just kind of like, this is where we live, so this is where you're going to go to school. But with daycare, like during the summer and then before when he was in preschool, we made sure that we picked one of the more diverse daycares in Springfield, which was downtown. And he's seen his class to just different, kids of different colors and ethnicities and that, and even different economic statuses. Like, it was just really great. And he has a lot of really good friends from there too. So the case with the foster daughter has been a little different. I feel like Hudson gets away with a little bit because if he puts on a hat, if you don't look really, really close at him, you really might not catch, it's not as obvious as the whitest man in the world carrying a black baby. Like that's, that's
sure. You are very white.
Yeah, that's me.
You and my wife could win that award for the whitest.
So like that has been a little different. So yeah, there has been some instances of like going to pick her up at daycare and saying, we're here for, insert name. And then they have brought us the wrong baby before because, they're like, surely that's not it, And so just those sort of things, which you can choose to, take offense to, or just know, like, if you show grace in this moment, that sort of stuff. Obviously we have our eyes wide open to some of the bigger things. Again, we made sure that we chose a daycare for her that has diversity in it as well. It's just the fact of the matter that where we live, she's going to grow up in, if we were to adopt her, she's going to grow up in a white culture. And how can we make sure that we're not, that we're not as insulated as maybe we've been in the past, like our neighborhood is just very, very white. So how can we make sure that we're exposing her and ourselves, probably more so us, to diversity? And where can we find that? Because it's in the town. Honestly, it's in very specific places of town. And that's most of the places that most people in our class and our race would avoid in this town. And so how could we, how can we make sure that that's not the norm?
That's that's really impactful. I think that's really important for anybody that adopts multiracially, is that you have to locate, you have to ask questions. And I think you have to be willing to take the hard answers. I do think like I said, I have 2 Korean aunts. So I'd always ask my dad, and, he was way old. He was like 16 when they got adopted. So he didn't spend a lot of time, but I think it's just different now. People are much more aware of the little microaggressions, things like you bring in the wrong child when you show up. And I'm sure nobody does it on purpose, but it's still a microaggression, is that idea. So question here, we're going to kind of wrap up our last 5 questions here with you. First off, how has this changed your marriage?
Yeah. We were just talking the other night about, like, we still have, once we get the kids to bed and we kind of sitting there on the couch, the TV shows, that sort of stuff. And it's like, remember when this was like every night, and we would eat dinner at, 8:30, 9 o'clock, all that sort of stuff. So, it's obviously changed our rhythms. It's changed, it's changed so much, kids just kind of take over. And that's really been one thing that we've tried to be mindful of, is that it's our faith first, it's our marriage second, and it's our kids third. And I know that's not like a popular view, maybe not even on an adoption podcast would it be, like your kid's not the most important thing in your life. But, if your child is, then the marriage will suffer. I mean, like if you don't take the time for the date nights, and you don't take the time for the connection, like, man, it's going to like anything else would, like, if you decided you were going to work 30 more hours a week as opposed to, spend time with your spouse. I think we've just had to be really, really mindful of when we do have that time, that we're not sitting on the couch just looking at our phones or that sort of stuff, and just like, kind of vegging out on our own. And that's important too, to just have our own spaces as well. Like we have our own spaces, we have our couple space, and then we have our family space. So, I mean, that's been definitely huge. It's changed a lot for us, communication wise. because you just think about like, there's only been one time when I forgot to pick him up. So that was just once. He got
just one time. You're doing really good.
Just one. I mean, he just started kindergarten in August. So he got to hang out in the cafeteria for a while and whatever. So it was just that the sort of communication thing, calendars, budgets, all that sort of stuff. So
I know my wife, she thinks it's funny that I'm interviewing people because my listening skills are not so great. So
you're doing great, man.
I'm trying, man. It's that active listening. So let me ask you this. So the part of the podcast is try to get dads to understand that we all struggle with stuff. What's probably been the biggest struggle in your journey? Like just as a dad, what's one thing that you really just struggled with?
I am I struggle with the whole, you think of, Proverbs tells us to be, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to get angry. I can do two of those really well. That last one, especially as the kids get older and they find the buttons and they know the buttons.
Oh, yes. Wait till they get old. Wait till they get to middle school. Like my oldest is right now.
My slow to get angry, like fuse has, it's worn down. So, especially, you think COVID, you think close quarters, you think lockdown, that sort of stuff. And, our little guy who's now going to be 6, he has just found those times and he just knows, I like to tell this story because it's really funny. He's obviously got, his mother's attitude, adoptive somehow. I'm not really sure. They're both very stubborn.
They get that.
And so she came out of the hallway after putting him to bed the other night. And she was like, did you let Hudson put that sign on his playroom door? And I was like, I don't, did he put a sign? Cause he makes signs and tapes. The kid loves tape things to everything. So he tapes up these signs and I was like, what does it say? Like Hudson's playroom or, keep out or whatever. She said, no, he put a sign on his door that says, try me. Like, just try me.
Just try me. Let me see what's going on. My kids wouldn't post that on their door. They'd just be like, let's go, Dad. Come on now.
He's just like, and that's been his kind of attitude of like, all right, buddy, here's the consequence if you do that again. And then he's like, oh yeah. Like, that's kind of been his, he's obviously, feeling out his boundaries and, seeing what he can get away with sort of a thing. So, COVID has ratcheted up that closeness as much, but I would say, yeah, just in kind of the stroke of honesty there of like, I never lean towards like, I'm just going to be quieter and more gracious as you continue to tick me off. I'm just going to get louder and more angry, which I know, every time after I do it, I'm the one that ends up apologizing. I'm the one who ends up in the wrong because I've just lost my, marbles over, whatever it was. Something that was really insignificant, but I decided that's the hill I'm going to die on. So I would say for me, growing, like just being that slow to anger to, somebody told us just the other day, when you talk about meltdowns with kids, or we talk about, kids kind of losing their cool, that our job as parents is not to end that meltdown. It's to make sure that they're safe, like it's not to end that problem, because it's like, it's like negotiating with a drunk person. Like you're not going to get anywhere when a kid is throwing things and screaming at you. Like you're not going to negotiate and go, can't you see that logically? You 6-year-old idiot, like it's not going to work like that. But our goal is to keep them safe. And that's kind of our whole entire family motto, with our foster daughter, with Hudson. It's our job as parents is to help you make good decisions and to keep you safe, even if you don't make good decisions.
Yeah, I think that's the tough part. I think especially for a new dad, like we already have 3 sons, so we think we know what we're doing, but in reality, we really don't. I think
so you need a girl. You need a girl.
And I do, yeah. And that is true. We do need a girl. But kind of wrapping it up here, what's any advice you'd give to a guy? Because I know there's a sense that dads really don't want to adopt or foster, and I kind of want to break that myth. And what's something you could say to a guy that is on the fence? It's not sure they want to jump into this yet. Kind of any last advice? I think I asked Les, if you had a billboard, what would you put on it about adopting? For men.
Yeah, a billboard. Wow. Yeah, I would say I'd say a couple things. So I'm gonna have to get 2 billboards. The first one would be that like your interest in the process is so important to your wife. Like if you have a wife that's like pushing for this, or that she would be into this, or like whatever, the fact that you would listen and that you would care. If you haven't seen the movie Instant Family Net yet, you need to go watch it. That movie with Mark Wahlberg, and he's that dad. He's that like, oh, maybe we're our life is fine. We don't need to do that. And then she starts talking about it more, and then he starts looking at the pictures online, and it just breaks him down. But that idea of you don't often see it where it's the dad that kind of takes that lead, where the dad is the one that's like, we're going to do this. I'm going to help with the budget of it. I'm going to help with the paperwork of it, because there's a lot of paperwork. I'm going to be proactive and make sure we're on time to every class. I'm going to find books and resources. And that says a lot, I think, to your spouse when they know, without being prompting, hey, you have to read this, or I want you to read this, that sort of stuff. And that. The second thing I would say is that if you start the process and you start to feel like it's too invasive, it's too close to home, that it's going to cause more problems than whatever, I would just urge you to keep going. One of the things that I think surprises most people when they start a process of adoption or foster is when they get into the home study and they start asking those questions that start making you feel uncomfortable. Because they're going to ask you all of them, all of the things I was thinking about before we jumped on this podcast. It was like all of the things that you haven't discussed openly with your spouse. They're going to want you to talk about those things. And it's a really bad idea to talk about those things with the caseworker first and
yes,
your spouse. So like if you don't have a very like open conversation in your marriage on things of the past, of things that, and this is everything from legal to that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying they're going to, that they're going to push and pry and that sort of, they will. I mean, you're going to get the background checks, and you're going to get the federal and the state and all that sort of stuff. That's all going to happen. But if that's, if that's what's keeping you from doing it, like, well, I really don't want to have that conversation with my wife about that thing in my past or about that thing of my childhood. That's a really, really sad excuse to leave a kid in the state's care or in an orphanage, So I guess kind of the meanest I would get was just say, man, like, deal with your stuff, get over it. These kids need you. And for you to take that step to deal with some of that stuff, for one, it's going to be just positive overall anyway. It's going to be something that is better for your life, whether you foster or adopt anyway. And secondly, you're going to get to teach, you're going to get to raise and teach a child to not make the same mistakes that you made. Honestly, you
hope to.
Yeah.
You hope to.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I mean, they're going to come up with their own creative ways to screw up.
Without a doubt. And that's some powerful stuff, Alan. And I know I appreciate, I need to hear it as someone that's, waiting to adopt, as all our stuff is done is that waiting period. And just hearing your stories just kind of lifted me up, man. I appreciate it. And your journey is phenomenal, and just you and your wife's heart, adopting and fostering. I mean, you hitting all those boxes, man. Like, we watched The Good Place. You got all those points now, man. When you go to The Good Place,
got all the points, man. Hey, we adopted our dog too. So our dog was a rescue.
That doesn't count. Doesn't count.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. All right. Yeah.
All right.
He's kind of the worst, but
no, but it's so powerful to hear you talk. And I know a lot of men are afraid, to take that journey and take that step, or they're just kind of along for the ride. I think you're right. I think you both have to be bought in. I don't think you can have just one in and then one sort of in. It just doesn't work, or it's not going to be successful. It's not fair to the child. And adoption's hard. I mean, foster care is hard, that we're experiencing and listening to you. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be things, but nothing easy is ever, anything good. Like I was telling somebody, when I won a state championship, we had been to the quarterfinals 3 years in a row and lost to the same team. And one of those was on your wedding day, believe it or not. It was 2000. Oh, yeah. We lost to Cassville 20-21 on a missed extra point. And that's called karma for not coming to my wedding. Yeah. And that was a game. That was a year I thought we were going to win it. And when we finally did beat Cassville and then win the state championship, that was ever so sweeter. And I think those losses help us respect in those victories. But Allen, I cannot thank you enough. I know the listener, my parents are going to love listening to you. But it's some powerful stuff, man. And hopefully you can come back on, and tell us for the other kids you're going to adopt. I think you're going to take about 10.
Yes.
Right?
We have to get a bus.
You have to go. We need you to get domestically. We need more international. Tell us what it's like to adopt from all those other.
So I would just say and going. I mentioned a few of those things, like the Instant Family movie. You want to talk about the losses and that, like that's a real, like that's because it's close to I've seen as like a theatrical version of what could really happen. That's more foster connected. And then also that empoweredtoconnect.org. I just looked that up, empoweredtoconnect.org. They have a podcast. It's parent training. They actually have a link on their site right now that's called Dads Connected. So they're working in that realm too, of just getting dads involved in the process of raising kids. We don't have the best reputation. So
there's resources out there. And I know that hopefully that some of these men that listen or moms tell their husbands or wives or whatever, whoever listens, I don't know, whoever listens.
Indeed, yeah.
But I appreciate it, Mr. Tyger, Pastor Tyger, Dad Tyger, and like Daniel Tyger. I really appreciate it. Allen, you're a great man. I appreciate you coming on. And I'm sorry I missed your wedding again. I know.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
And we lost. It's a double whammy. We missed your wedding. But anyway, Allen, thank you so much, my man. And you have a great day and have a happy Thanksgiving and a happy holidays. Tell your wife I said hello. Thank you, Allen.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for listening to the Adoptive Dad Playbook. Be sure to follow us on social media